On your Friday episode of Locked On Raptors, we're nearly there. Raptors Media Days Monday. Training camp kicks off next week, and I've got some burning questions.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Friday, September the 27th, and I'm your host, Sean Woodley. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors now for going on 11 seasons on various platforms. You can follow my work over on the bad website that sucks at Woodley Sean. You can find the show on Instagram at Locked On Raptors. And of course, you can join us in the Locked On Raptors Discord server. Link in the description of the podcast. It's free to join, and it's a great place to come hang out, talk ball. The new season's beginning. We'd love to see some new faces in there. We have seen some new ones join lately. It's a great little listener community we got building, and it's where I will be talking about games for the most part this season as they're going on. So come and join us. Of course, you can find the show on your favorite audio app of choice. We're on YouTube as well. Follow, subscribe, rate, review, tell a friend. Much appreciated when you go ahead and do that. And today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And we will get started here on your Friday episode, looking ahead to Media Day on Monday. That's right. Today is the last day after, 5-6 months of off season without new daily developments from your Toronto Raptors, and it's very exciting. We're like 9 days away from the first preseason game. Basketball is in the air. Raptors basketball is, at least. Vince Carter's jersey's hanging around Toronto. You can feel it. It's very exciting. I'm looking forward to watching some real, actual basketball played by the Toronto Raptors, which they did not do much of last year. And so going into Media Day Monday, I kind of wanted to use today's show as a chance to just sort of lay out what I'm curious about going into Monday's press conferences with Shirley, Darko Rajakovic, Masai Ujiri, maybe Bobby Webster, maybe one of the two. We'll see. Players, of course, will come through and answer the questions. And look, Media Day is always very broad. There's not a whole lot of specifics that go around. Sometimes you get inflammatory stuff like the selfishness comment about Pascal Siakam last year, and we all run with it. But for the most part, you're kind of looking to read between the lines. And so here's what I'm going to be reading between the lines for, essentially, on Monday. And there's a few different things. We'll get into the defense, something I asked about last year, and obviously things did not go so hot with that defense last year. I want to get into the plans for the two most important players on this team, or at least the two most, the two guys they've invested the most in Scottie Barnes and Immanuel Quickley. But off the top, I think number one, and this is oftentimes what I go into Media Day most curious about, is what's the stated goal for this year? And I think a big thing that hurt the Raptors last year, and frankly in the last couple seasons, is not going into the year with a clear stated goal of what they want to do. And it's not even so much that they come out and say, we want to win this many games and make it this far in the playoffs or anything like that. But you'll be able to pick up on cues and things that they kind of reference and the terminology they use to kind of get a feel for what they think they are, what they think their ceiling is, what they sort of envision the course of the season being. And usually you can kind of just use the number of times Masai Ujiri says winning to kind of figure out the math on this. If he doesn't say it a whole lot, maybe it's not so much a year where they're going to go try to win basketball games. If he's making impassioned pleas for the city to believe and talking about how they're going to win a championship, then okay, yeah, they're probably all in, as they were during the Kawhi Leonard season, for example. And so curious what their sort of general vibe is on what the expectations are for this year. And I think, that's going to inform or be informed by a lot of the decisions they make in sort of micro areas of the team, right? I think there are a few things they'll be able to do once they're actually playing games to kind of tip their hand as to how much they care about winning. Obviously, how much are they playing the starters? How much are they running Scottie Barnes, Immanuel Quickley, Jakob Poeltl out there? Are they giving them, high 30s minutes totals every single night? Are they trying to optimize every possession? Who plays backup center? Is Kelly Olynyk going to be out there just kind of going through the motions as a center who's not really a center anymore, kind of like we saw last year as the backup five? Are they going to try to come up with more creative solutions? Are they going to see if Bruno Fernando can hang or if Scottie Barnes can hang as a small ball five more often? What about the rookies, right? Are the rookies going to play a lot? Or is Jamal Shed going to start the season with the big club? Is Jonathan Mobo going to have a rotation job? What's Jacoby Walter's job going to be out of the gate? I think we'll probably see Walter with Bruce Brown out. And I think, his shooting is something that you got to at least see if it can play in the NBA right away, similar to what we saw with Grady Dick last year. But typically, rookies lose minutes, right? And so if the Raptors have an appetite for giving all these rookies all kinds of opportunity, that probably suggests they don't care so much about winning. And I'm curious, like, will they come out and state a goal? Is it going to be something where they come out and say, hey, like, we're still in information gathering. We're still trying to take positive steps. Is it sort of a, saying without saying that they're going to maybe tank softly at the end of the year? Are they seduced by the idea of a really good draft class next year? Or is it something that they're going to sort of prioritize this season? Again, you're not going to get direct answers on any of this stuff in all likelihood. You'll probably just have to read between the lines and sort of pick up on cues and infer a lot of things. A whole lot of inferring goes on media day. Perhaps it's not a great thing that we do a lot of inferring on media day, but that's just kind of how you got to operate, because they're not going to come out and expressly state, we're going to try to tank to be a bottom five team or something like that. You got to kind of use their actions and use the things they say to try to draw those conclusions. And so I think I'm just, are they going to avoid what the issue was last year, where they kind of came in, they were, talking a big game about sort of revitalizing things. And it seemed, at odds with the situation with Pascal Siakam, the whole Siakam weirdness of it all, him very clearly kind of not someone they thought was going to be there even on media day, someone they were very clearly telegraphing, hey, we're probably going to trade this dude from media day. And maybe that was their stated goal at the start of the year. And maybe they succeeded in doing that. But it just didn't seem like the last couple seasons, the team came in with like a clear direction on sort of what the plans were. And so I'm curious how much we get from them in that regard this year. Like, I think if I was to guess what their plan is, I think their established track record over the years suggests that they're probably not going to try to go tank this thing, right? I think the Tampa tank was one thing. It was a lost season playing it not in their home arena. The health situation for that team in March of that year kind of dictated the terms for them. They didn't really have a whole lot of choice in the matter. And I think that was a year where they were perfectly fine to just kind of tank it out and sort of ride it out and see what they got out of it. And of course, that was eventually Scottie Barnes. Very cool. I don't actually think that they wanted to sewer last season the way they did. I think, again, their hand was kind of forced by Scottie Barnes and Jakob Poeltl getting hurt in late February, early March. But had those guys stayed healthy, I think they were going to give that team the chance to go win some games and push for a play-in spot. It really seemed like it was lining up that way after a very promising February where some things kind of locked into place. And I think the injuries kind of derailed everything. I don't think they were going to go and just kind of piss away the last month of the year, because they were trying to gather information and kind of get a feel for what this new team was going to be, a team that they had just assembled essentially by in like February, once all the deals kind of, finished up and the dust settled from the deadline. I think my guess is they'll probably want to do something similar this year. If they can avoid injury, if they can stay relatively healthy, I think their goal will be to maximize this season and not just kind of play the lottery game at the end of the year, maybe a couple weeks of soft tanking at the end to better lottery position or whatever, if things break that way. But I don't think we're going to see them shut it all down with a month and a half, 2 months left to go in the season, barring some disastrous, like they're the 14th team in the Eastern Conference come January. I don't think that's going to be the case, despite their schedule being challenging. I think their starters are going to be pretty good. I think they're going to win their minutes a lot of the time, and I think they're going to have a pretty high baseline because of it. And I think they're going to, again, want to get a look over the course of a full season of actually playing competent, structured basketball, which they just did not do last year, to see what it is they're exactly working with going forward, and then use next summer as that sort of pivot point to really determine, okay, what are we locking in? Who are we moving out? What's the core of this team going forward? And whoever they end up taking in the draft, that'll be, I think, just kind of a cherry on top of all of this. And so I don't think they're going to go in and sort of come out and, make it clear that they're not super interested in being competitive this year. I think they are going to try to do their darndest to win some games and play some competent ball, some ball that's conducive to the development of their most important players. But, obviously the way they've built this roster almost runs counter to that, because they are so prone to an injury derailing things. If Jakob Poeltl goes down, they're screwed. I'm kind of curious to hear what they think of their center situation, how confident they feel that they have enough behind Jakob Poeltl to actually get by. I don't think they do. So curious to sort of hear what they think on that. Again, a lot of reading between the lines, but ultimately, can we figure out what the goal is? And are they going to be clear about it? Are they going to be shady about it? Always a big, interesting part of media day. Another interesting thing is kind of getting a look at how they want to play basketball. I think last year it was very focused on the offense and how they were going to do it. I want to get into the defense and how the Raptors are going to play defense this season. What they said they were going to do last year, what they failed to do last year, all that. We'll get to that coming up in just one sec. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, the #1 sportsbook in North America. And NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return over on FanDuel. When you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you can go place your bets in-game. That's a fun thing. Of course, it's not just in-game betting either. FanDuel has all kinds of ways for you to go wager your money if that's the thing you're into. I like to do a fun futures bet once in a while. Low stakes, put a couple bucks down. If it all plays off, great. If not, I'm not any the worse off. But, it's all there for you. If you want to go pick an NBA champion, you want to go throw some money down on some awards picks. I think Immanuel Quickley and Scottie Barnes are both in the top 10 of odds to win most improved player. Maybe you go throw some money down on that, have some fun if they end up pulling it out. Either way, you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet at FanDuel. That's FanDuel.com. Go check them out, the #1 sportsbook in North America and the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. Back at it here, talking burning questions going into Toronto Raptors Media Day on Monday. And, we kind of started pretty broad. I want to get a little more specific in terms of how this team is actually going to play basketball. I think we got a good idea last year of what this team wants to do on offense. They want to play the sort of European-inspired, quick decision-making, keep the flow going, use lots of dribble handoffs and split actions and all that kind of stuff to create a pretty nice, flowing, almost egalitarian offensive system. I rate it. I'm cool with that. I liked the way they played offense last year, and I think with better talent and more health this coming season and more continuity and just like not this constant shuffle in and out and uncertainty of who's going to be on the team next week that we dealt with all last year, I think there's a chance they can kind of creep up the offensive rankings just based on their system being pretty conducive to difficult to guard offense and just some better shot making and general offensive proficiency from the guys who are playing. And, you're not forced to roll out Jordan Nwora and Jamias Ramsey and Malik Williams for long, long stretches. Although, shout out, Jamias Ramsey got signed to the Exhibit 10. He'll be back in camp. A man who likes to dunk, so he's got a little bit of my heart at least. When it comes to the defense, this is the thing I'm super curious about because I don't think we got any inclination last year of how Darko Rajakovic actually wants his basketball team to play defense. I did ask him about it on Media Day last year as sort of like, okay, well, what's your sort of defensive philosophy? Got a pretty broad answer. Let's revisit that answer from last year when I asked Darko about what they want to prioritize on defense.
For me, it's going to be first priority is going to be protecting the paint. We got to be really disciplined with our rotations, taking away corner threes, using our length to heavy contest everything, and we got to really do a good job of defensive rebounding. I think tendency in NBA is going to be that more and more teams are going to try to send multiple players to crash offensive glass. So with that, we got to do really good job of defensive rebounding and giving us a chance to go and score early in a shot clock.
So pretty boilerplate stuff from Darko on the sort of defensive philosophy for that team last year. Protect the paint, limit corner threes, and get some defensive rebounds. How did they do in that department last year, by the way? Not so hot. They were 19th in corner threes allowed by a frequency of shots that the opponent took. 16th in rim shots allowed, very middle of the pack, and 27th in defensive rebounding. So not exactly mission accomplished on those things last year, but I don't blame Darko really for any of the defensive issues we saw last season. I think, maybe there's something in terms of how they played defense in the early part of the season when Dennis Schroeder was there. I think the defensive talent of what they were rolling out in the starting five last year was high enough that it should have been a much better defensive unit. It was good for like 2 weeks and then totally fell off a cliff. I think part of that was Dennis Schroeder completely forgetting how to play defense at the point of attack and dying on every screen set within 5 feet of him. I think part of that was OG Anunoby very obviously quiet quitting on the team, at least to a little bit of an extent. And the team just did not have the juice overall. And look, they were trying to sort out the offense stuff. My guess is they focused a lot more on offense and practice and film last year than on defense, trying to instill a system, which is, pretty intricate and ornate and all that. I get it. There was not nearly enough time or runway for them to build any sort of cohesive defensive identity last year. And I'm curious to see just sort of how much of a priority it's going to be coming into this season. I'll probably ask Darko this question again. Everyone loves offense. I feel like I'm the only freak ever asking about defense when I'm at these press conferences, but I'm looking really into how are they going to use the skill sets they have, the defensive skills and strengths and limitations their guys have, and assemble a defense that has an identity, a sort of set base way they want to play. No defense plays the exact same way every single game. You can't do that. You get torched. As Darko said at the end of that answer that I didn't include there from last year, you got to have multiple pick and roll coverages. You got to throw different things out there. Otherwise, you're going to get torched in the NBA because offenses are just too good. That's true. You got to have different looks. But I think all of the best defenses in the NBA have a core idea of what it is they want to do most of the time. The Minnesota Timberwolves, the Boston Celtics, all these teams have a concept in mind of, okay, this is how we're going to approach defense most of the time, with room for, ad-libbing and sort of on the fly, changing things up when it's called for. How to best optimize this Raptors team, I think, is a pretty interesting question. And if I had it my way, I do think I have a pretty clear way I'd like to see them try to play defense most of the time. You've got Immanuel Quickley. I think better rotational defender than on-ball guy right now. Same goes for Grady Dick. You've got Jakob Poeltl, who's a pretty mobile, I think pretty scheme versatile big man. That's a great thing to have. You can play multiple different styles with him and sort of throw different things out. You can play those multiple pick and roll coverages with him. I think that's a really nice thing to have. And I don't think he gets enough credit for being the mobile, fleet of foot big that he is. He covers a lot of ground and he does it pretty nimbly. I'm a pretty big fan of Jakob Poeltl as like a mobile big in space. I think, the beauty of that is you're not stuck having to play one kind of way, right? There are some bigs where it's just like, well, you can't move. We got to play a drop. And that's just the only defense we can play. We're going to be prone to pull up shooters, giving us all kinds of hell, especially if our guards can't stick at the point of attack and fight over screens. There's a lot of challenges baked into that. I think with Scottie Barnes, he's a really nice help defender, great rim protector on the second side. He can do a lot kind of on the back layer of a defense. I think that's a strength to lean on. There's weaknesses you got to deal with too, right? I talked about Quickley, like not a very good point of attack guy. I think he's got to get better. I do think he can get better. I think his sort of wiry frame, he's a pretty elusive guy. He's got long arms. Like, I think he can be a better guy, sort of getting skinny, fighting over screens, sticking on ball handlers, staying on their hips, obstructing passing lanes, contesting shots. But right now he's more of a value in rotational defense. Obviously, what is RJ Barrett defensively? I think that's a big, giant open question for everything. Grady Dick, on ball stuff is a problem. I think with all of that, you kind of look at the different ways you can go about kind of setting your base pick and roll coverages, right? And there are a few different ones, right? There's drop, where your big man hangs back deep in the paint and you really lean on your guards to stick with the guards at the point of attack and fight over screens, all of that. Most of the time you're going over screens unless you're up against non-shooting guards, which are just not really a thing anymore. Most guards can shoot, pull up, hurt you in some way. And so you got to be fighting over. You got to have guys who can be sticky at the point of attack and not get hung up on screens every single time. So there's drop coverage. You can go with like the Nick Nurse trap and blitz model, where it's just like, all right, two to the ball all the time. We're being long, we're being chaotic, we're forcing turnovers. And yeah, we're out of position on the back end sometimes, but it's worth it for us with the way we play and the way we can be sharp and quick with our rotations. I think that's maybe not what I do with this team. They're not super long. They don't have the sort of obstructive length to do what the Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby, Scottie Barnes versions of the Raptors did. Precious Achiuwa too, where they're just so smothering when they do send two to the ball that it's really a benefit to them. That's not quite what I'd roll with here. there's switch defense, right? Some of the best teams of the last, decade have been great switch teams. Think about the Golden State Warriors, all time good at switching. Just all right. Everyone can guard everybody. There's no need to get too chaotic and sort of make it overly complex. We're just going to switch pick and rolls, and it's going to be fine. That's a move. The Celtics do it very well, obviously, too. Mostly 1 through 4. Kristaps Porzingis is not exactly switching onto guys all the time, but like there's a lot of switching built into what the Celtics do as well. I don't think this Raptors team can switch. In fact, I think with the lack of on-ball defense and the sort of varying sizes of guys that they've got, I think they might be one of the least equipped teams in basketball to be a switch defense. And so that's probably not the answer. I think what I'd like to see as the base defense for this team is a more sort of like hedge and recover heavy type of defense, right? Where Jakob Poeltl's coming up to the level of the screen quite often, deterring the ball handler, recovering back. That counts a lot on having help behind in the second layer of the defense. So that's going to really call upon Grady Dick, RJ Barrett, if they're kind of sagging off guys over on the wings, that they got to be there in that second layer around the nail to be there to stand and sort of stop paint touches from happening as Jakob Poeltl recovers back. Obviously, you need your guards to be pretty active, at the top of the defense in this situation as well. And you have Scottie Barnes at the back end as sort of the mess cleaner if things do slip through. I think that's probably the move if I'm the Raptors looking at their defensive talent. When Kelly Olynyk's in there, it's probably got to be more of a drop, even though he's not like a great shot contester. He's not Brook Lopez back there, but just speed-wise, I think he probably has to be leaning back. And maybe you can get away with that if he's playing in lineups with, say, Davion Mitchell, who's an incredible point of attack defender, awesome at fighting over screens, and you can actually get by playing a drop defense because he can contain the guard at the point of attack. All interesting questions I'm sure we'll get a look at throughout the season, especially in the preseason, right? We'll see sort of some inklings of what they're trying to do on defense. But if I'm just guessing as to what they will try to do or sort of what I would do if I were in the position, of course, Darko Rajakovic knows more about basketball, forgot more about basketball before lunch today than I'll ever remember in my entire life. But if I'm looking at optimizing the strengths of this team, minimizing the weaknesses, I think a pretty hedge and recover heavy scheme is probably what I would look at if I'm the Raptors, using the versatility of Jakob Poeltl to your advantage. That is going to give up some things. It's going to concede, that it's tough on corner threes, for example, right? Because you're in rotation, you got your help guys sliding over. Sometimes you can be prone to giving up corner threes when you're doing that. But maybe that's fine if you're limiting paint touches and you're not getting burned by guards at the point of attack, getting downhill or pulling up on your head. Like there's all sorts of concessions you got to make playing NBA defense. Offenses are really damn good. You're not going to be able to stop everything you want at all times. And I would like to see the hedge and recover defense be kind of the mainstay that they go with for the most part this season. Obviously, they got to mix it up from time to time. Certain guys, you're guarding Luka Doncic, for example, you got to throw a different look at him like every time down the floor. Otherwise, he's going to get comfortable and carve you up. So it's always moving. It's constantly fluid. But if I'm looking at how this roster's built, that's the defense I'd like to see them play. Very curious to see what Darko Rajakovic says about how they intend to play defense. I don't think he's going to come out and say, yeah, we're going to be a hedge and recover team, and this is how we're going to do it, because that's not what you get on media day. But can we get some sort of inclination as to what they're going to do, how they're going to use different guys defensively? I'm pretty curious to see. Speaking of using guys and sort of optimizing them, Scottie Barnes, Immanuel Quickley. To me, that partnership, the single most important on-court thing to watch for this season, as far as like individual two guys kind of playing off of one another. They're the two guys the Raptors are most invested in. We're going to get into what those guys are up to, what the Raptors have cooking for them is a big burning question for me going into media day on Monday. We'll do that coming up in just 1 second. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks, which is the #1 daily fantasy sports app in North America with over 5 million active members. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. All you got to do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Prize Picks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When your picks hit, you get your money in as quick as 15 minutes. And Prize Picks invented the Flex Pay, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit all kinds of ways to play Prize Picks with the Raptors season coming up, preseason games coming soon. Maybe you wait to the regular season so it's more predictable as to how many minutes guys are going to get and all that. But either way, download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDINNBA to get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDINNBA on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. Rounding things out here, looking at burning questions going into Raptors Media Day on Monday. I will be there, looking forward to it, and catching up with old pals and all that stuff. It's always a fun first day of school vibe when you go to Media Day. So looking forward to getting back and being around the team. And as I mentioned earlier this week, I'll be around the team all season. I've got credentials for the season. I'm very excited. So hopefully bringing some cool stuff to you via that access throughout the year. So keep an eye out. With that, the final burning question I have, it's regarding the two most important guys. The Raptors invested a whole lot in Scottie Barnes and Immanuel Quickley this offseason. 5 years, $32.5 million a year, up to $35 a year for Immanuel Quickley. We know Scottie Barnes got the fund max, the rookie max extension. Could be up to a whole lot of money. I forget the exact figures, 275, something like that. If he makes all NBA, it's going to be at least 225 or so. Forgive me if I'm getting the figures wrong. I don't actually care all that much about the exact dollar numbers. There's lots of money, lots of cake, and Scottie will be making 25% of the cap starting next season and up to 30% if he goes and makes all NBA. Either way, I think I would really love to get a peek, at what both guys have been working on this summer. I think that was an interesting thing last year with Scottie Barnes that portended, I think, a lot of the good things that happened with him last year, right? It was he finished up his second season, said, my conditioning's bad. I got to get it better. Talked last year about how he worked on his conditioning all summer, and we saw that put into practice last year as he was able to sustain Scottie Barnes-ness for longer stretches of games. What these guys do in the summer matters a whole lot. There's a reason why when guys have summer injuries, it's tough. This is where a lot of development happens and a lot of the sort of laying of the foundation for the season to come is done. And it does seem like Scottie Barnes and Immanuel Quickley were working together a lot in the offseason. We know the team went to Spain for a little bit in August. I'm really curious if there's any sort of detail on how that all went. And I'm sure that'll be talked about some tomorrow for sure, or on Monday for sure. And I'm just really curious to see how these two guys are going to be used in concert with one another. And again, we're not going to get a full readout of all the different sets they have in mind for Quickley and Barnes to run in a two-man game or anything like that. But, what does Darko say about how he wants to deploy them together? What does Scottie Barnes say about, sort of working with Quickley in the summer and vice versa? How did they work on gelling? How do their games figure to mesh? I think the struggle with them last year was there just wasn't enough time for them to really figure each other out. I think they both have, skill sets that should very much complement one another. They just never quite found it. The screening actions between the two of them always felt very stilted and clunky and like there was no plan. They didn't really know, okay, like this is where I like my screen set or this is when I want you to come and set the screen, when I'm going to be moving. Like there's a lot of just like simpatico you need when you're running two-man game. I think of the way Pascal Siakam and Kyle Lowry used to play two-man game together. Like that was built over years and years of repetition of, kind of warping defenses and then sort of adapting to how defenses were going to guard it. How many times did we see Kyle Lowry screen for Pascal Siakam to great effect and vice versa over the years? You don't just figure that out right away. And so I'm curious just, how much did Quickley and Barnes work on that two-man action this summer? How much did they work on building that on-court understanding of, where each guy likes his bread buttered and all of that? I'd love to hear again what Darko has planned for them, to some extent, right? Does he envision them, running dribble handoffs and stuff? Does he envision them running pick and roll more? Like all kinds of different things that he's never really got a chance to tap into last year because they played together for so few games overall. Among those games, there was a lot of, uncertainty, right? A good chunk of those games came with Pascal Siakam on the team. He leaves, the dynamic shifts entirely. There's just like a lot to sort out between those two guys. I feel good about where Quickley and Barnes are going to end up in terms of their on-court partnership. Like I feel quite bullish on it. I know I'm in like the top 10% of Immanuel Quickley believers on earth. And so I'm feeling pretty good about, him kind of carving out more of a star role on this team. What does that mean in terms of overall status in the league? I don't know yet, but I think individually I feel quite good about both guys. But how does their on-court chemistry work? And what do the Raptors say? If Bobby Webster and Masai Ujiri are asked about it, what are their thoughts? What are their visions for Scottie and Quickley? Do they view these guys as the two pillars of the franchise? Will they say that out loud? If they don't say that out loud, does that maybe hint at, okay, Quickley felt like he was really good, we wanted to lock him in, but maybe they're not super married to the idea of him being the clear number 2 on this team? That informs a lot of stuff going forward. Again, be a lot of inferences drawn, a lot of conclusions kind of reached maybe prematurely just from what happens in media day. It's a lot of readings between the lines once again, but I'm just fascinated to hear what Masai, Bobby Webster, Darko Rajakovic, Scottie Barnes, Immanuel Quickley all think about the Scottie Barnes and Immanuel Quickley dynamic, because like it or not, this is the duo that is going to define whether the Raptors are successful over the next handful of years. They are locked in. They're making lots of money. They need these two guys to be franchise pillars. I think Scottie Barnes is there already. I'm not worried about Scottie Barnes whatsoever. Last season was incredible, and I'm expecting another jump forward. Maybe not in the same, all-encompassing, he gets better at everything kind of way, but, some sort of honing of the craft a little bit, maybe uptaking the scoring punch and stuff like that. I think we'll see growth from Scottie Barnes, and I do think we'll see it from Quickley as well. Can it happen in concert with one another, right? If both of these guys are taking big individual steps and their skill sets are looking more advanced, but they're not really meshing on the floor, what does that mean for the long-term viability, right? That's a big question. And it's going to be a question that's going to be, I think, answered throughout this season. I think it's going to be something that people who observe this team are going to have their eyes fixed on whenever they're watching Raptors games, as they should. And I think Media Day will give us the first insights as to just how much the Raptors believe in those two guys and exactly what they have in store for them game plan wise to try to deploy them in a way that's going to optimize both of their skill sets and help set this team on a track where you talk about clarifying direction. If those two guys can clearly stake out, we are the 1 and 2, everything falls in behind us. That goes a long way towards the long-term building plans for this team. And if they don't, and it just doesn't quite work, then you're maybe back to the drawing board in a year. And, at a drawing board, a very expensive drawing board, no less, to try to figure out how to make the fit work. Or, maybe there's a move that has to be made. Again, that's way down the line, very premature to get into any kind of what comes next if things don't go well this season for these two guys, because I do think it will go pretty well overall. Their skills do mesh and combine, I think, quite well. And they just need the reps in time. Hopefully the summer granted them that, and they can come in hitting the ground running in the way that they were never able to kind of get the Flintstones feet going last season, in that season of turmoil and tumult and horrible basketball. With that, we're going to leave the show here. Thanks so much for hanging out, as always, and thanks for being here throughout the offseason. I got to say, this was a long offseason. I feel like we talked about a lot of stuff and maybe hit stuff multiple times that didn't need to be hit multiple times, but that is the nature of doing a daily podcast throughout an offseason when your team doesn't make the playoffs. Very much appreciate everyone who's rocked the show throughout the offseason, and starting next week, we're back there. It's Media Day. Training camp kicks up. Preseason games soon after that. Home opener on the 23rd. We're getting close. We're less than a month away. And I'm fired up. I'm really excited to watch a team that's not playing totally rudderless, terrible basketball. And hopefully they can sustain it for a little while and keep this season fun and interesting and kind of bringing us new stuff. Speaking of new stuff, I'm not going to reveal exactly what it is yet, but there will be very soon more ways in which you can engage with the stuff I do, and perhaps even a return to some writing for me, which has been a little while since I tapped into that skill set, but that was how I got my start way back in the day. And so keep an eye out, some announcements on that, I think probably next week. So that's what we call a tease in the biz. We'll leave it there. Thank you so much for hanging out. Please follow, subscribe, rate, review, tell a friend. We'll talk to you on Monday with another episode of Locked On Raptors. Thanks for hanging. Bye-bye. I'll hit those in the season, I promise.